Turumbático. Te lo dije. A ti nada más. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar here in the Chassé Theatre Cafe, where we have installed our studio. At home, where you are looking right now, or maybe later on in the rewind at this special program. A program that is focused on the International Talent Program of the BredaPhoto Festival. In fact, this webinar is part of a series of webinars that all focus on this unique international program that unites 10 art academies and photo schools around Europe. In each webinar, every academy will introduce itself through a video production. Also, in every episode, we will show you one or two pitches by alumni, graduated students from these academies. At the end of this festival, a special jury will select 3 participants to receive a special mentoring program by the staff of BredaPhoto. Besides the school introductions, the pitches, we have 2 special guests today to talk about the theme of today's webinar, which is concept in imagination. We have Dutch-Colombian artist Raquel van Haver, who is joining us already live in the studio, and Belgian photographer Renee Paule, who is joining us via a Zoom link, as she currently resides in Switzerland. As announced, we start with an introduction to one of the participating art schools in the International Talent Program. They each present themselves through a video. At the end of today's show, we will look at a contribution of the Lucas School of Arts, Narafi, in Brussels, but we start with CASC, the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Antwerp. Take it away.
Welcome to the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Antwerp. I'm Sarah Stone, a second-year Bachelor in Photography. This school is the 4th oldest school in the world, coming after Florence, Rome and London, founded in 1663 by David Teniers.
Hello everybody, my name is Noah and today I will tell you something about my BredaPhoto project. So, for this year's project I created a series of collages titled The World of Today, which deal with the problems of globalization, or rather our globalized world. I think that we are collectively at a point of no return where we need to decide on how we want to continue living. The work that I have created stands exactly for these worst of times today, while in my opinion the best of times are behind us. But I asked myself, how did I come to this conclusion? And I think it has something to do with Stefan Zweig, The World of Yesterday, which, yeah, maybe you know by now where my title comes from. I found a few aspects that correlate quite well, not only to the festival or to my work, but also to our time in general. And as he wrote, he knew the highest degree and form of individual freedom and later its lowest in 100 of years. And he has been celebrated, despised. He was rich and poor, free and unfree, and he saw the best and worst of times during his life.
This project takes place in a specific valley in the French Alps, the Maurienne Valley, which is situated near Italy and Switzerland. The Maurienne Valley was nicknamed the Aluminium Valley, as it concentrated the most part of France's production from around 1910 till 1970. The valley is also very close to Italy and has always been a corridor for various types of trades and exchanges. Today, Maurienne's status as an exchange hub is again put forward with the building of a high-speed train line that will link Lyon to Torino and by extension Paris to Milan. My work is connected to the festival theme, the best of time, the worst of times, through its aesthetics as well as the problematics engaged. I'm definitely interested in ecological issues when I photograph industries or the highway or the train line, which relate, I think, to the worst of times. For me, it is part of a larger reflection about land use and how our culture considers our environment as a resource to be exploited with the consequences that we know.
Suddenly, everything is upside down. I am locked at home, and you are here with me in my temporary studio where I have been forced to shoot lately. The project itself is inspired by the book of Genesis. It discusses the idea of how would have been the beginning of today's human being, like on a new land, an empty place with nothing, a place with dust on the ground, but where life exists. A place which can represent the beginning and the end of our kind. Being said, in man there exists the whole power of the principle of darkness, and in him too the whole force of light. In him there are both centers, the deepest pit and the highest heaven.
The project that I'm submitting for this edition of BredaPhoto Festival is titled The Easter Egg. There's two main definitions of an Easter egg, one being a chocolate in the form of an egg hidden during the Easter holiday. Another one being an item or an action hidden by a designer in a program of a video game. In the Easter egg, I gather a series of singular objects in between states. You never quite know if they are in construction or in the process of decay. And all of those images together, they form a representation of what a landscape is, or a landscape in construction, in the process of becoming a territory. I will say that this ensemble of surfaces become signed to be interpreted by the viewer. To do the project, I frequently travel in a region in the north of France called the Westhoek around Dunkerque. This region was interesting to me for its complex and rich history and recent politic of growth and development it has.
Hello, I am Renée Paule from the Royal Academy of Fine Arts Antwerp. My project proposal for the BredaPhoto Festival 2020 is inspired by the 12 archetypes of Jung. Jung stated that in the collective unconscious of people, 12 universal mythic characters reside. So everybody in the world should fit into one of these characters. You have the sage, the innocent, the explorer, the king, the creator, the caregiver, the wizard, the knight, the rebel, the lover, the jester, and the orphan. Almost all of these are named after the medieval court, which inspired me to update them and create archetypes unique to the 21st century. The first archetype is the fashionable activist. Activism is a very common occurrence in today's climate, with issues like climate change, homophobia, racism, and sexism. More and more people feel the need to take a public stand. Second archetype is the spiritual addict. This archetype focuses on the popularization of veganism and fabricated spirituality. Though publicly focusing on being extremely healthy on social media platforms, they don't usually shy away from unhealthy habits like, for example, drugs. This is the archetype of the cancelled artist. With the Me Too movement came the fall of a lot of influential people. Once invincible, more and more powerful men are held accountable for their actions. These people are consequently cancelled and stripped away from their position in the world. The last finished archetype is the archetype of the modern lover. This is a parody on the influence apps like Tinder and Grindr have on modern dating. Jung had already created the archetype of the lover, and I decided to take this translation to present-day literal.
Thank you, Kask, for this very diverse and dynamic interpretation of this year's festival theme, the best of times, the worst of times. We now move on to the two pitches of two individual photographers. As I said, each participating academy has nominated one alumni to participate in the BredaPhoto support program. And as a prize, 3 of these photographers will receive a special support program to produce a special project within the next 2 years. Today we will show you 2 pitches. One is by Annabella Schwachten from the Lucas School of Arts in Brussels and by Joost ter Meer from the HKU University of the Arts in Utrecht. Annabella and Joost, the floor is yours.
My name is Annabella. I'm 29 and I live in Brussels. My main practice is photography, but I also make collages. I am most interested in capturing and exploring what it means to be human. This is my mother. For my whole life, she has photographed my brother and I and our home life obsessively. I made the project XXX, Ma Andy Bay, The Cats and the Others, the title referring to how she ends her text messages. I decided to copy her. For several years, I always had a disposable camera with me, and I would photograph our home life tirelessly. This time, it was her turn to be watched and documented. I now want to go one step further and create a dialogue between my pictures and hers. My goal is to make a publication and to find creative ways to exhibit this work. I believe a book or publication has great potential because our dynamic is quite unique, and because our different approaches question the different roles of photography. The other project I want to devote myself to is called Echo Chamber. As well as photographing her surroundings, my mother also takes pictures of the TV screen, particularly BBC World and BBC News. I will rearrange these photos into a fictional story of an impending apocalypse, using real news photos to create a fictional story, hereby underlining the questionability of images as fact, and also bringing up the controversial theme of fake news. This is a project that addresses issues that are especially relevant in our current times, and I am very excited to start this project and to delve in the enormous amount of material I have available. I believe I would be a good candidate for the support program because I have a lot of material and project ideas to work with. I am extremely dedicated to my artistic practice, but I also realize that I am at a point where I could really use some help, especially when it comes to making a publication. I have the ideas and the work ethic, but I need help with the designing and technical aspects. I would also really love to be a part of a photographic and art community. It is so important to build a good network of people and friends, and I would love so much to meet people from who I can learn how to develop my practice further. I am ready to commit 100% to these 2 years. It is a wonderful opportunity, and it's one that excites me so much just thinking about it. I thank you for taking the time to watch my video.
Hi, my name is Joost Samir and I'm a photographer slash visual artist from Utrecht in the middle of the Netherlands. My work is very colorful, playful and sometimes a little bit absurd. For me as a visual artist, the experiment with material, the form of presentation, but also the processing of the photographic image itself is just as important as the depicted subject on the image. I get inspired by modern visual culture and the way that images work. A central question in my work of practice is what it means to be a human. I see my work as images that reference a certain recognizability, but altogether they form a new world. Okay, so I want to use the upcoming period of 2 years to develop myself as a photographer and an artist. I want to expand my knowledge, expand my network by showing my work on art fairs, on international talent programs and exhibitions. And I think that's very important because that way you show your work, you share your vision, you talk with people, and it's a very helpful and direct way of getting feedback to better yourself as a human being, but also as an artist and also my work with that. Next to expanding my knowledge and my network, I really want to challenge myself to start a new project that's a very big and long-lasting and also a social project about a world that's changing and how people react to that change. And of course, by doing so, I will keep pushing myself and experiment with material, experiment with the narrative, and also experiment with photography. I do think I have a lot more to offer. I've got so much ideas and plans that I want to share with you that are just waiting inside of me to get out, but it's something that I cannot do on my own. Starting a project or making work is something that's quite good for me, but all the actions and decisions around it, they can confuse me. So with the help of the talent program, I could get professional coaching to develop myself and my work, to share my visions, my ideas with all of you. The talent program can really make me reach to places where I could never go on my own and connect with people that I could never connect to when I would be on my own. And that's something that I would be so extremely grateful for. And I also want to be a person that can help others from that position as well. So thank you for your attention, and I hope we will see each other soon.
Okay, so these were the first two pitches. More to come in the next webinars. Now let's move to our first guest, present here in the studio. Dutch of Colombian descent, studied at the HKU University of the Arts, just as Joost, who we just saw. A visual artist with exhibitions at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, Beaux-Arts in Brussels, winner of the Dutch Royal Award for Modern Painting 2018. A warm welcome, Raquel van Haver.
Thank you so much.
Raquel, welcome. We see some works already here
Yes.
in the background, I think, from your exhibition at the Stedelijk.
Yes, this was 2018. It was a huge exhibition of collage works, installations and painting. I think it was like 6 rooms, so it was very huge.
Quite large.
Yeah.
You describe your own work as loud art. What do you mean by that? I mean, I think we get an impression looking at it, but maybe to hear it from your own words would be helpful.
Actually, I think like 2-3 years ago, an interviewer came up to me and he asked me, like, can you please describe your paintings? And it was very hard to describe it in one word, but I think when I need to say it's loud, there's so much color in it, it's noisy, the texture is there, you cannot actually, like when you pass it, you have to pay attention, it's just right in your face. Right. So if you have to see it as like a sound, it's screaming, it's loud, it's present, it's there.
Are you implying maybe that most art is too silent?
I don't think most art is too silent. I think every object or subject has its own voice, and I think sometimes the louder the voice, the more present or monumental the work, but even the silence can be very loud as well. So.
Okay. But it's your, let's say, personal style to make it scream almost.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your background and like your professional training? I mean, you studied at the HKU University in Utrecht. How did that shape your approach?
So I started at the Rietveld, but
in Amsterdam.
In Amsterdam, yes. And after 2 years, I actually decided to go to the HKU because the HKU actually offered me a bigger space to work in. So I had maybe 30 square meters for myself as a studio.
Wow.
So that's huge. So that's actually also where it came from. Like I started to work big because I actually had the space to work with monumental sizes.
Okay, so actually the size of the work came because you had the space, not the other way around.
Yes.
That's really interesting.
I took the space, and then again also for the Stedelijk Museum, I spoke with Els van der Plas, like former director of the Opera Ballet Decor Atelier. And they offered me a space to work in. So finally I had this huge amount of space. So I actually could make a painting of like 10 by 4 meters. So it's like getting a bigger space means
allowed you to, but also gave you the inspiration to create those. So it's a strange thought experiment. Had you stayed at the Rietveld, you might have created smaller paintings.
Yes.
Can you imagine your work would still have classified as loud art?
I think with smaller paintings, I don't think so, no. Like, for me now also the experiment to actually work with thick materials, it needs to have a platform or medium that actually gives me space to also experiment. And do it on a small canvas, I don't think it will work, no.
Interesting. So your training and the possibilities that training offered you allowed you to become the artist that you actually have become right now.
Yes, indeed.
Do you see that you might move back to smaller size, or are you still not done with the monumental pieces?
I do actually both. So I also paint small portraits. They're like 20 centimeters by 30, so that's quite small.
That's quite small indeed.
I even have like 5 by 5
Wow.
canvases of painting. So for me, I like to shift between like the monumental image or like the work. Like also for now, in 2 weeks I will open a new show at Bonavante. So also we made huge sculptures with bricks, red bricks. It was insane. But then again, next to it, you will see a small video work of mine. So it's very nice to just like shift from one medium to the other, and also in size.
And how does that? Can you talk a little bit about how you decide, or how you create all these different formats and different mediums? Is that like you start with the beginning? Oh, I'm going to make a painting and a photograph and a video, or is it more intuitive?
In the beginning, I always thought I have to work at everything at the same time. So the idea, the concept needs to be there, the medium needs to be there, the story, everything needs to be aligned. But over the years, I figured out that's not always the case. So most of the time, I start to do a research on a topic I find very interesting. But most of the time, I even don't know exactly what the topic is. I just know the direction. And from that point on...
For example, what could a description of a direction be?
So sometimes people invite me to do a residency at a space. It depends which place, but let's say I did a couple of years, I did a residency with the African Arts Foundation in Lagos. So I knew I had to do something with photography. I'm most of the time I'm using photography as a base for my paintings or for my collages, but that's it. Oh, that was it at the very moment. So then I just started to wandering around, meeting people, and from that point on, I actually found a lady who was like, she fascinated me so much with her story, with her life, with the people surrounding her, that she actually started to be my subject in a way. So we became actually more or less friends, and we actually became close friends in the end. And I started to photograph her life. So I knew I had to do something in Lagos. I knew I wanted to share a story, but I didn't knew at that very moment what. And finally, after months, I realized, okay, she's going to be my subject. And I just started to collect all these images from her and from her surroundings. And I kept on coming back to Lagos and to her neighborhood to actually make the series.
Right, and that's how eventually all these different forms and formats come about. You had this big show at the Stedelijk 2 years ago. How did that come about? Because it's quite something for a fairly young artist to have an exhibition of 6 rooms at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. So how did that happen?
I think... When did it happen? Good question. Me and Martijn van Nieuwenhuizen, former curator of the Stedelijk Museum, now director of the Pont in Tilburg. We started to chat first a little, and then he just came to my studio. He looked at the work, and I think also because we both, like, he used to live in the southeast of Amsterdam, and I lived at that moment. I lived in the southeast. He also felt a little bit homesick.
There was a connection.
So there was a very good connection. So we just kept on talking, and so I asked him to come back, and he did. And he was like, "Okay, you know what? Just send me your portfolio. Maybe you can do a small piece somewhere during the year, somewhere in the collection. I don't know." But that idea became bigger, so he started to talk about 1 room, then 2 rooms, and then 3 and 4, and so on.
So it's quite a traditional way of getting a museum show, to have the curator come to your studio, you build a relationship, and something happens.
Yes, true. So, but it was also not planned, like, because I thought, okay, Stedelijk is way above my head, so I even I was not focusing on getting a show.
You were completely open to any ideas that were coming along. What would be a next logical step for you? I mean, if you consider that.
So I'm now, I just finished the series Amala Reina. So that's actually a series of...
That's also in show here in Braid Alpha
also
Toe,
a couple of collages here. And it shows a story about female social leaders in Colombia, because most social leaders are threatened. Some people getting killed because of their status and because of their ideas. And so I did a series of collage works, paintings, sculptures, video work, and we also did a documentary about it with Art van Wolf, like a documentary program here in the Netherlands. And I don't know how, but I decided to make a small movie, and it tastes like I actually liked it.
And then
so much
again,
more.
move to another medium.
To another medium. So I shot I think it's 30 minutes film, yeah, about this lady who's singing in front of the camera for me, and I now understand the urge of the medium self. So for me, actually, I recall myself like I want to be a storyteller. I'm not a painter anymore, photographer, or somebody who just
Storyteller is how you would define yourself.
Yes, because like the medium actually works for me. When I want to tell a story, maybe video is better than photography, or maybe painting is better. So adding all these things together works for me. And I think now I found out that video is kind of
that's the next step where you want to go. I mean, it's interesting that you're trained as a traditional visual artist at these two art schools. You have to adapt to all these different techniques and different ways. And do you all do it yourself, or you just how do you manage all that technical knowledge? I mean, just being able to produce it in the first place.
I think also just to learn every day is something that actually keeps you healthy and young. But also, I'm very blessed that I have like brilliant people around me. So for the collage works, I work together with Hans Wilschut, photographer. So he has like this huge space, huge studio where we can actually experiment also in Photoshop. So I'm sitting next to everybody I'm working with.
And you tell them
and
what
I
to
tell
do.
them what to do, and then I try to learn and understand. But they already have knowledge of maybe over 20 years. As well with the editor and with everybody else, and I keep just trying to control everything, but still I need other people with their knowledge.
Would you say that, but that's maybe my interpretation of it, but if you have to tell other people what to do, you also have to be very aware of what you want to achieve. So is your control over the story bigger because you work with other people? Is that a step you could take?
I think it's not controlling. I think it's friendship or like trust. So
no, but I mean, you want them to execute what's in your head. So I would imagine that it takes quite a lot of control over your own thoughts in order to be able to express it.
True, yeah, but it also comes
does it become a cooperation?
It's sometimes it is, yes, but it's also because I already come up with that idea. It's very easy to tell. Okay, I want to have this, this, and this, and this, but because I don't know how to do it, they actually are in control over that part.
Of course.
But then again, if it's more beautiful and it works like that, I'm fine with that either. So it's just like it's trust. It's like a friendship, and sometimes you have to give, sometimes you can take. So it's more or less like a dance.
Right. So it's almost co-creation then. Yes. It becomes. So it becomes more of a team effort than just a single.
So, yes, and like when I'm painting, it's like almost selfish. Like I'm in the studio 12 hours a day, just by myself, painting. So that's also for me a very nice way to finalize the idea. Right. But then again, to work together with an editor or with a photographer or anything else, that gives a deeper layer, I think, as well to the concept.
And for instance, this video, would you still classify it as loud art, or is it? Does that really apply to the paintings?
I think it's more traditional, or what I just made, but I'm gonna research on that.
It may become louder, even.
I hope so.
You do a lot of background research. You already mentioned that, and you travel extensively. You've been to Colombia, West Africa. Are your subject matters always placed in those regions?
Most subjects, actually, the idea of my subjects come from my own neighborhood in Amsterdam Zuidoost, but because it's very broad and there's so many stories around there, I always can link them to other spaces. So I think for me it's very important that I have a personal link to the subject, as well that it is a very urban story
Okay.
to tell. And from that point on, I started always to deep first in the history of the region or of the story of that person's self, and then I
So
start to move
travel
on.
and connections are a really important
Yeah,
part of
it
the
is.
process. And do you feel that essentially you're telling your own story, or are you telling other people's story?
I think both. I like because it's. I think for maybe I'm not sure if the painting already showed, but it was actually one series of work called 1101 Delirium, and that is a body of work that shows me and my friends in a room, and we are partying. And actually, I started to paint them from the beginning, where everybody was very fresh and healthy, and we still not that drunk, until the end of the party, and you see just everybody laying on the floor and passing out, and I don't know, it's like already 10 in the morning, and people still start drinking. And in a way, it's a story about our community, but it's also a personal story. So I always try to link these two together.
Right, right. You have a background in Colombia, you were raised in the Netherlands. Could you say a little bit about what role identity or your identity plays in your work?
I think for me, identity is like one of the red lines in my work. It's because I am Colombian but adopted, came to the Netherlands at a young age. Identity always was part of my life because I had to tell other people who I was, because they couldn't see me as Dutch, but also they couldn't see me as Colombian. So I was always shifting through spaces. And I think that also started to be a way of thinking, a way of making work. And that's what I'm still doing. Like, I'm still shifting spaces all around the world to collect the stories, to be the artist, to be just a normal girl, to be going from place to place.
You shift between all these different identities. When did it become clear for yourself that you wanted to become an artist, or that you wanted to go to Art Academy?
To be an artist, I think after graduation from the Art Academy, because I didn't have a clue, actually. No, I thought that, but I think also the way they teach us at art school is that probably it won't work out for you. They are very harsh. They
told you it probably won't work out for you.
They told everybody, I think.
Well, they told everybody it probably won't work out for you.
In the first day of school, we had to actually enter this big room, and we were sitting next to each other, like all the freshmen. And they were like, okay, you know what? Look to your left, look to your right. Those people won't make it. And probably you won't make it either. And we are very happy if at least one of you in this whole room, like 300 people, will make it, or will make a living out of it. So that was already start of how to become an artist.
Very positive approach, very constructive indeed.
So then again, I didn't thought I would work out as an artist. I thought maybe I will make some paintings or drawings, sell them in a small gallery, but that's it. So after graduation, when I finally understood what it was like to be an artist and how much of a struggle it was in the first few years to actually just go on and get the money there and pay for my bills and get the studio and get the right connections. Finally, I understood what it was. But the decision to go to an art school or to become one was actually quite easy to make because it was natural to me.
All right. Here at the Chassé Theatre Square, you show 4 pieces that are part of your project Amo la Reina, or I Love the Queen. Can you talk a little bit about those pieces? What do we?
Yes.
We'll see them later on in the presentation. But they're loud, they're very big, they're very impressive. They're collages, so it's really collected material. Yeah. Is it all photography, or do you use other materials in that?
There are other materials, the same as my paintings. I like to build up layers after layers. So other photos I made myself during my research in Colombia. I started to do this research a couple of years ago already. I called a friend of mine, and he has a big foundation in Colombia called Ajara. And Ajara is an organization that works together with social leaders across the whole country. And I told them, like, listen, I am hearing all these stories about women getting killed in Colombia, especially now, and it was like 2019. And he was like, yeah, that's right. It happens a lot. And I was just flabbergasted that I didn't heard anything on the news here in Europe, in the Netherlands about it. When I did my research online, I couldn't find anything. So my decision was to go there myself, to see it with my own eyes, and actually to write about these things, these horrible things that are happening. So when I got to Colombia, I also realized that even in Colombia, people were not aware of the whole problem about social leaders. So me and my assistant from Bogota started to traveling around, connecting with all the people from Jara, and they actually broadened up their network as well. So from that point on, we started to travel for months, going to one place to the other, talking with people, making photos, videos. They took us around, they gave us new names again.
And you have these 4 individual pieces. Does each image represent one story, or are they just all a collection of general emotions and happenings and events?
The problem was, because we were traveling so much, I understood that it was not easy to make one piece about Colombia, like presented like this is Colombia, this is how it is. It was impossible. Like every city, every region had its own history. And every person in that city had its own history. So how could I just say, okay, you know what, me as the European, this is your story, take it and leave it. So I started to follow a couple of social leaders in the region and trying to make and connect their stories together in one piece. So it's like an overview of all kinds of histories and stories coming together.
Per region, you would say there's one image. Wow, very interesting. Well, we'll have a look at those images later on in the slideshow, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about the process. Thank you very much for now. We move on to our next guest, or our other guest, who joins us from Switzerland via Zoom link. She's an alumni of CASC, the Royal Academy of Art in Antwerp. We just saw her work presenting yourself in the video. Now you're in Lausanne because you do a master degree at École, the art school over there. You're an art and fashion photographer. You work for magazines such as Knack magazine, Knack Weekend in Belgium, and Sabaculture magazine. Welcome, Renee Paule.
Hello.
Usually we have a big round of applause, but as the studio is empty, welcome, Renee. As we already saw, we saw your work. You showed BredaPhoto your project called the 21st Century Archetypes, and they're based on the 12 archetypes of personalities that psychologist Carl Jung identified, and you have identified 8 modern archetypes. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly, that's correct. Jung already talks about the 12 archetypes, which he named after the medieval court. And he states that every person fits into one of these 12 archetypes. So I decided to take these medieval titles that he gave them, like the king, the jester, the hero, and such, and translate them to the 21st century and create archetypes very much unique to today's age. And I approached this with a lot of humor, and yes, it's really a question about what determines the 21st century.
We see in some videos of how you created these images, and then the final presentation is the final piece of art. We'll look at 4 or 5 of these small clips of how these works came into being. But what I'd like to know first is what gave you this idea? How did you come to the idea to create new archetypes?
Well, it was really an idea that came from the theme, the best of times, the worst of times, and I wanted to create these portraits and these archetypes that really show us today's age and also really focus on best of times, worst of times. So it was really a project I made especially for the BredaPhoto Festival.
It was really inspired by the team's project and approach. That's interesting. There's 8 archetypes that you've created. Is that finished, or are you still looking for more archetypes? Do you think you will need more to classify us modern people?
Well, yes, of course, this is very superficial. The original idea was to have 12 archetypes to kind of, portray the 12 archetypes of Jung. but because of the Corona and stuff, I had a change in plans, and I think the 8 archetypes are nice, but maybe I will continue working on them and think of more archetypes.
Okay, but you're not in the process of establishing more archetypes yet. What do you want to achieve with this project? Do you have a specific goal with showing this work?
Well, not much a specific goal. It's I approach this theme with a lot of humor, and I hope people recognize these archetypes in their daily lives, in their family or friends. And it's a bit of a critic, but it's also appreciation of the times we're living in, and I just hope people can understand and recognize themselves.
Do you recognize yourself in your own classification?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about this. If I had to choose one, it would probably be the influencer, even though it's not 100%. But of course, just as Jung did, he gave titles to these archetypes, but these are just titles that stand for a larger thing, different characteristics, motivations in life, and this is also what
obviously
photos.
Every person is a combination of more archetypes,
Yes.
I imagine.
Usually, and these are just titles to describe more underlying motives.
Okay. And now you're at École in Lausanne, you're working on your master degree.
Yes.
Are you creating a specific project as part of your master degree or doing a specific research?
Yes, I am doing specific research, but it's very much in the making. I'm here, it's my second week of school, and I chose the school also because they have a lot of workshops, a lot of projects I need to work on, not just a master project. So I'll be busy on a lot, I think, for the moment.
Okay. How long will your training in Lausanne be? Is it a 1 year or 2 year program?
2 year.
3 year even. Wow, so that's long.
2 year.
2 years.
No.
And after that 2 years, where do you see yourself going? I mean, Raquel really is the autonomous artist, creating her own work based on her own ideas and the stories of others, of course. But where do you see yourself? Did they also welcome you on the first day, saying, "Well, maybe only one of you will actually make it as an artist," or was it slightly more constructive as a welcome?
Well, this is something I always know. Always knew. It's a very, very difficult business, but I see myself more as somebody who wants to work in fashion and fashion photography. So I stand a bit outside of the art world at least on work, I think.
So the goal is to become more of the commercial photographer in that sense.
Well, commercial, but I really hope to do what I am doing right now and use this for fashion, but never stop doing what I want to do creatively. I hope people will hire me to do me and not just commercial stuff.
And being part of a festival such as Braid Alpha Toe, which is very much a representation of what's happening in the art world, do you feel that can be helpful for your future career also in that other, let's say in the fashion world? Is that a plus?
Yes, of course, I think. Yes, I think to be a serious photographer for me in both aspects is important. And I think this will definitely help. I think most fashion photographers are also appreciated. Good fashion photographers that I admire are also appreciated in the art world. So it's definitely something I'm very happy with.
With the 8 archetypes that you created, can you explain a little bit how you came up with each individual archetypes? I mean, there's some really interesting ones. You've got the reptile ruler, the spiritual addict, the tech savior. Where did the inspiration come from for the names and how to create the visual representation of those?
Well, yes. I really wanted to create archetypes that are unique to this century. So really things that couldn't really have existed 10 years ago. this was something I was very focused on, and just looking in my surroundings, people I know, people I know from online things, really looking around me, and it was pretty easy to come up with the archetypes, I think.
Okay, and was that really something that you just did by approaching your own network, or do you think it could have been, you could extend it by doing maybe sociological research or involving an academic community into that? Would that be a plus for you to be able to do that?
Well, yes, but right now the archetypes, it's not really necessarily psychological, it's not necessarily the real deal, but it's just these archetypes that are very much people we recognize on today's landscapes, and
And how did you create the visuals? I mean, where did the inspiration come from? You made circular images. Here they're shown with a white background, and here in the festival they actually received a golden background, which really makes them almost sparkling. Why the circular form of the print?
Well, I was very interested in combining the circular form of the print with the gold frame, because kind of to mimic Christian icons and add this extra layer of dramatic portrait.
Right, to make them almost iconic in that sense.
Exactly.
Right, interesting. Raquel, do you recognize yourself in any of these modern archetypes?
Oh dear.
I can name them for you. I have them all here. So would you be more of the fashionable activist,
No.
the cancelled artist, the modern lover, the crypto chaser, the influencer, reptile ruler, spiritual addict, or a tech savior?
Oh my God. Can I be all?
Well, that's up to Renee. Can she
Yes,
be all?
Of course.
Do that.
Renee, the title of Braid Alpha Toe, you said that you were very much inspired by the theme of this year's festival, and that's where this project came from, the best of times, the worst of times. Does your work express the best or the worst of these times?
Well, that's exactly how I approached the title, was that I want to show absolutely both the best of times, both the worst of times, from a distance. And that's exactly, I think it's a very balanced mix.
Okay, and Raquel, for you, you especially focusing on the work that's shown here at the festival.
Yeah.
Is it the best of time or is it the worst of times?
I think I will just leave that up to the viewer. Like both, or actually all the stories, they tell a story that's now happening in Colombia because of a lot of history, a lot of civil war. But still these women are trying to make something out of nothing. So it's quite inspirational if you hear their stories. But if you see where they actually are at this very moment in their lives and the situation and what's going on there now, it's difficult. So I think to take just that inspirational part, and like for me as well, this like what you also see here behind you, is that I actually wanted to take all these individual stories out and to put them on a pedestal to celebrate their life, their womanhood, and their strength.
So for both of you, it's really the combination of the two that's combined within your work. And I'm interested to hear, how do you experience these times yourself? Do you feel that there is this paradox in this, or this unique moment in time between the best and the worst happening at the same time?
I think that at this very moment, people start to be aware of a lot of things that already, like there were so many things going on. I think as well for your work, like you see people actually waking up as well, like with the iconoclasm film you just showed here. Like people now understand the importance of history, and they understand the importance of their voices, and they also now understand what social media does. So all these things are coming together, and they evolved in something, like I still don't know what is going on, but something really big is happening now.
And how is that for you, Renee? Do you recognize what Raquel is saying? That really it's a time of movement, maybe more than of paradox.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I think we've had times like this a few times in history, and I think we're definitely at a turning point right now. And I hopefully it's gonna get better again after.
Both of your work looks very controlled. I mean, neither of you take snapshots, right? I mean, you really seem to be very much in control of how you want your work to look. I mean, in the videos that we showed of your work, Renee, you can really see it coming into being. And I think with your work, the collages, and you cannot be but in control to create, even though it's with a team. Can you explain me, do you pre-visualize the work, or do you see where something needs to go? I'm not an artist myself, so I'm fascinated by how does that work in your mind's eye? Do you see something, do you see a white canvas and you know where everything has to go, or does it grow on you? Renee, can you try and answer that?
Well, for me, I think it's a bit similar as Raquel in the way that I work a lot as a painter, because I start also from a blank canvas, and I work very intuitively. So I have an abstract idea in mind, especially to take I always start with the portrait of the person and then I build around it. But yes, I work very intuitively and really change my mind a lot as well. These are also collages, so they exist of a lot of different elements, but they're also very easy to construct, to take away. I have a lot of freedom until the very last moment. And I mean, yes.
And when do you decide when a work is finished in that sense? Because if you work in that way, I mean, you can just keep adding and distracting and changing. When is the moment when something is actually done and ready to be shown?
It depends. Like for me as well, when I start to work on new series, it starts with the research, and then it starts with collecting images, and then finally, when that's right, I can actually start to sketch, and from the sketch I go on to the painting. And then again, like, because I'm always focusing also on time, there's always a deadline for me, so I need to get to the deadline, and then it's done. I think because you as well, like, you're a writer yourself, so you know, like, you have all the ingredients. It's like cooking, and you need to add it, and then when it's right, you know it's right, and then you have to move on again. So it's like trying to just put everything together proper. Like, you need to have like the right colors, it needs to be in balance. But it also takes a trained eye to see when it's done, because it's always very hard to say.
Yeah. Is that similar for you, Renee, that you kind of know when it's ready and shown, or are you still in doubt when you're sending, let's say, the final piece to the festival or to somebody as the final product, or do you feel that when it's done, it's done?
Well, it's a bit of a mix. But also because I'm still a student, and because I do a lot of fashion shoots or for other people. I work for other people a lot too. I always work with deadlines, so then it's a bit easy to think of when it's finished. It's finished when it has to be finished, I guess.
It's the deadline that decides.
Yeah, and then I can let it loose and just take a step back.
When you exhibit at a festival like Braid Alpha Toe, there's a lot of work around, and maybe you haven't seen it yet, but maybe you've been able to check it out online. What kind of work do you look for yourself, or are you only interested to see how your own work is represented? Raquel?
No, like for me, stories or images that actually appeal to me, that talk to me, that give me some extra spark, or that made my day. Like, it doesn't need to be something of my taste, but it needs to be something unique. Like, especially for me, I like scale. I love scale. Like, so if it's big,
If it's big, it
most of the time
works.
It works. But also, if to see stuff that I haven't been seeing before, some techniques that are super unusual, or sometimes what I also like is that you see photography and painting coming more and more closer. So like, I like to just play with that and just get like, just stays everywhere a little bit and just get inspired.
Yeah, and for you, Renee, I mean, we have Corona, so you know it's limited. But are you still able, or have you visited many exhibitions and festivals?
In the moment, not so much. Of course, I have planned a tour of all the museums here in Lausanne. But I think me personally, I am very naturally, like most people, attracted to large scale as well, sensational things on first. How do you say? Yeah. And I like colors. Things that naturally attract me are colors, large scale, things that shine, I guess. Yeah.
So if it's
that's my most natural form.
right. So in order to make an impression on you both, it needs to be big and colorful. That's
shiny.
And shiny.
Yes.
A lot of gold. Raquel, you also mentioned it's the story that you're looking for.
Yes.
What is then the connection between the form and the story? Is there an ideal way to make that connection?
There's no ideal way. I think every story has a different type of approach. So in that way, that's difficult to say. I think for me, stories, because you're an artist and you, especially here in the Netherlands, we do have a freedom of speech. We can talk about it. We can show almost everything. So I think as an artist, you also should take a stand to do that. And especially if you have a broad platform, you should be aware of your surrounding as well. Like, I'm very social engaged, so like to tell all these stories and to just actually give information to the viewers, I think that's.
But you do want the artist to actually take a position within the situation that they work.
Not for all artists, but I think as an artist you should be aware of that you can do that. Because it's also important, like we do sometimes we shape as well, we shape history. Like what we actually now showing to the world will become history, and people will learn about this maybe in 150 years. So we need to be aware of also the power we have to use images and to show to the world.
Yeah. Do you recognize that, let's say, almost responsibility that Raquel talks about, the responsibility of documenting the world and taking a position within the social situation, or do you feel that you just want to create the work that you want to create and it's up to the world later on to see if it's useful or not?
Yeah, I think so, because I think in daily life or on other platforms I'm very socially engaged and I have a strong opinion, and I think it's my duty to share this. But I never used my art to translate this. To me, my photography is something else, and I can put certain things in it, but it's never really the main goal, I suppose.
Okay. I mean, I think one of the reasons your work is selected at Braid Alpha Toe, I don't know because I didn't select it, but is because you are from certain communities with a certain background. You are also chosen because of the particularity of your voice and your opinion and your position. Are you aware of that background of the selection, or that you are considered to be let's say, an alternative voice within the art and media scene?
Yeah, sort of.
How does it feel to be considered a unique voice?
In a way, it feels sad if I'm the only. Sorry. In a way, it feels sad if I'm the only voice doing this, or one of the few.
Well, I don't think you're not the only voice,
but like for me as well, like for example, the photo behind us is that, like, when I'm traveling, I do a lot of workshops, especially with young children. This was actually at the border in Cúcuta in Colombia, Venezuela, where a lot of migrants and refugees coming actually to go to Colombia to find a better place, but they actually, it's a disaster what's going on over there. Many people die, many people are sick, a lot of human trafficking and so forth and so forth. And then still trying to actually come to the communities and start to work with these youngsters, to do workshops, to make art, and also to lift them up in a way, like to just give them a place they can run to for a second, to relieve the stress and just to draw and paint. And I think that also, that model, that a position to actually give strength also to other people and to take them with you on your journey, to give them relief or pleasure. I hope more people will and can do that, because like things like these are very important.
No doubt, no doubt. But I think what's also important from my point of view is that because of your background and identity and experiences, you bring a unique perspective to the people you work with, which will then in turn help the audience here in Breda and in the Netherlands to identify with that new interpretation. Do you feel a responsibility in that front, that you do bring an alternative perspective?
If it's like, yes, in that sense, yes. And I hope as well that it's not only me being the messenger, I hope it's also inspiring people to do it themselves. So it not only stays with that.
Right. So do you hope to inspire other artists, photographers, or in a more general sense also inspire let's say the general audience?
I think general audience, right. Yes.
Is that an ambition that you have, Renee, to inspire a new way of looking or a new perspective on society?
Well, yes, I like to approach a general audience as well. It's definitely a personal way that I like to look, and I think it's not really, it's an opportunity for other people to look maybe the same way I do, but it's not really necessary an inspiration for them. But it's, I think, a nice moment or experience.
Okay. Is that something that was discussed at all in your case when you were in art school, or maybe now at CASC or at Lausanne? Is that part of the curriculum? Is that part of the discussions that you have at school? Your voice, your background, your interpretation, your identity, and how that reflects in your work and then on the audience?
For me, I think I was one of the few people who actually was talking about that. I think it was more, the focus was more about the technique and the skill and just
learn how to create something. Yeah. And how is that in your schools, Renee?
I think it's more the opposite. It's a school that really works with concepts, and it's less about the technique. Yeah, I think I'm more of one of the people from my school who has the least of this, I guess.
Is there something, it's hard for you to say probably, Renee, because you're still in that system, but is there something now, looking back at your education, that you think that was never discussed and never talked about, that you would have liked to have learned or would have liked to have been, that would have been a topic at your training at the time?
I think back in the days, I was also at the HKU, and I'm now actually also talking to students from the HKU, and changed a lot. But before that, there was actually no opening to talk about identity. There was no information talking about African artists. There was no Latin American knowledge or Asian, so it was just European knowledge and art, literature, what we got. So it was problematic for me, because I really had the urge to understand more about my own background, about Latin America, Caribbean culture. And luckily I had a few really good artists around me already who actually gave me the knowledge. And the time and the ears to listen to and talk to about these problems I faced during my time at art school. But now I heard they changed.
They changed. Yeah. Okay, so that's moving in the right direction. Renee, is there something that you feel that is missing, or that is kind of underexposed in the training that you are getting or that you got in Antwerp?
Well, I think I'm just in a very opposite situation as Raquel, because I think most people make photos right now to say something, to advocate for something, or say something from their unique perspective or position of view. So I think that's very, very present amongst my co-students. And yeah, I am somebody who works a lot with style, and yeah, I think just in general, the importance of style, of your unique way of presenting something, is the thing that is less focused right now.
All right. The last question before we wrap up and we move to the final presentation. How important is it for you to be present, to show your work at a festival like BredaPhoto?
It's very important, yes. It's also for me because I'm multidisciplinary actually. So now I just reach a totally different public. And as well, I think to have these huge images now on this beautiful square amongst all the other amazing photographers, it's for me, first, it's an honor to be here, but also to tell a new topic.
Right.
And to show.
So it's the recognition and the possibility to reach a new audience. Yeah. Right. How important is it for you, Renee?
Well, for me right now, it's really important. This is the first big exhibition I've ever done, so it's a very new experience for me, and it's a very good one, and I'm very happy for this opportunity. I think also just the way my work is presented at BredaPhoto Festival is very interesting, because it's right now on street, so people can just look at it. They don't have to pay any entrance fees and all these things. I think it's going to reach a large audience, and it's nice also for me to see my work in a different way that I've ever seen it before.
Cool, great. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Raquel, for sharing your thoughts and ideas. Thank you. We now move to the last part of this webinar, which is, as I said before, an introduction to one of the participating art academies to the BredaPhoto International Talent Program. Your attention for the presentation of the Lucas School of Arts Narafi of Brussels, Belgium.
I started photography with the goal to make nice images.
And then I always took a picture without a lens on my camera.
Keep going and don't get discouraged even when things go a little bit wrong.
I think at some point it might actually be shocking how much light there is.
BredaPhoto is the professional bachelor degree of Lucas School of Arts. The campus is superbly situated in the green lung of Brussels on a hillside overlooking the city. Its unique location makes it an ideal and inspirational place to study photography. During our 3-year course, we offer students the opportunity to perfect both their technical skills and knowledge, as well as to evolve in the creative part of image making. We offer an extensive software training, practical classes and research projects with the focus on the application in the professional field.
My name is Kilian Wouwmans. I'm graduating at Narafi School of Arts.
I'm Jante. I recently graduated in photography at Narafi.
I'm mostly interested in still life and landscape photography, but in the future I would also like to experiment with car photography.
I focus mainly in documentary photography, as well as just portrait photography, fashion, just anything that involves people.
Our students come from all over Belgium and the Netherlands. Staying and studying in a cosmopolitan environment enables them to evolve on a personal level.
The fact that Narafi was situated in Brussels in the beginning was kind of daunting for me because I'm used to living in an only Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, and then suddenly like the majority speaks French. And when we had to do some street photography assignments, it was a really scary thing to not only approach people, but to approach them in a language that you're not really used to. So I feel like already for that reason alone, it was a good thing that I went to Brussels to study, just to learn how to communicate with people non-verbally if the verbal kind of falls short, that you can just through signs and body language can communicate. For me, a way to get to know a new place is by photographing it, because it's what I kind of know how to do. It's always a good thing to move to a city that you're not used to, just to see how different life can be somewhere else, but also how similar, and how even in the most different places, a lot of people, I mean, most of the time think the same things or have the same values as you. So yeah, in the end, I'm glad that I came to Brussels.
Some of our students have never taken a photograph before starting at Narafi. Our courses start from scratch. We start with the basics. Throughout the years, the students evolve to ultimately organize their own exhibition. Whatever your reason for starting photography, at Narafi we help you develop your love for images.
The reason I started photography was actually a long time ago already. I always liked to look at images. So I was always drawn to images. So I quickly realized it, and then I decided for myself that I wanted to do something that I really love. So I started to study photography at Narafi.
Historically, Narafi is considered a technical course, preparing for the work as a freelance photographer. But over the past decade, this has shifted towards a finer balance between technical and creative skills.
So even though I went there with more like a technical focus, I found that there was a good balance between the more technical and professional side, as well as the more conceptual artistic side. For example, in the first year, you learn how to use a camera, and you go through all the steps to just get a good image. But then from the second year on, you kind of like more and more of the conceptual seeps through, and you decide more for yourself which direction you want to take your images. And I feel like the professors, they guide you through that if you have a clear idea for yourself what you want from it.
Once you start progressing to the second and third years, you start to take up more of the artistic part of photography.
That's how it came about for me. Like at the beginning, I just focused on making a nice image and a beautiful image, and making sure like the light was right and the whole thing. But then more and more, I focused on how I could tell a story, or how I could make the projects more long-term instead of short-term. But then the technical side really helps you, because you don't really have to think about it anymore. You can just focus on the story you want to tell, and then the images kind of come from themselves.
And that gives you the freedom, I think, to start worrying more about the creative and artistic aspect of photography.
When I started my degree at Narafi, we had these courses, like the more theoretical courses. For example, like one was about the history of photography. And then we saw such a broad spectrum of photographers, like dating all the way from the beginning of photography till now. And it opened up so many possibilities of what could be done. And it just gave so much inspiration to look at what other people could do with this medium, and how you don't have to be that strict about it. You can, like, it's such a wide concept, a photograph can be so many things.
There are plenty of other activities at Nerafi, such as artist talks and guest lectures. In addition, we take our students to exhibitions, photo festivals, etc. At Nerafi, we like to spread our wings.
We did a lot of exhibitions. We went to BredaPhoto, to BredaPhoto, to Unseen. We went, also like some solo shows of photographers.
Due to the current pandemic, BredaPhoto opted to expand their online presence for the participants. Our students, Iante and Kilian, were selected and both submitted work with radically different ideas and approaches.
So the idea came from they were building next to my house. There was a building site, and at night they always turned on a very big light, and that light happened to shine directly into my sleeping room, which kept me up at night. So then I started thinking, well, I can't be the only one that has this problem, and then I started looking into it and realized that Belgium is actually a sort of a hotspot for light pollution. So the way I tried capturing this problem is by traveling all over Belgium. And then I always took a picture without a lens on my camera, always with the same exposure, to sort of make a comparison between the different places in Belgium, because it is a very technical, at least I think, a very technical way of taking photos, almost scientific, I would say, just almost taking measurements. That's how I think of it. So like that I did over 50 different locations. So then I sort of built up a map of Belgium and you can really see where there is the most light pollution. There's also a pretty clear divide between Flanders and Wallonia, which Wallonia is more of a sparsely populated, more forested area of Belgium, and Flanders is a more densely populated, more cities also, and it's quite clear that there is a lot more light over there. The images from Flanders are pretty bright. Also quite noticeable is more of a bluish tint to the image, which comes from mostly LED lighting that we're kind of transitioning to. And Wallonia, of course, is a lot darker, more of an orangey sort of tint coming from the older style of street lighting. So when you look at the histogram, in the darker places there will be a peak more to the left, and in the brighter places it's to the right of the histogram. Of course, it's just a peak because the entire image is more or less the same color and luminosity. There are some images that are almost completely black, mostly in Wallonia, of course, and those would be located more in the forested areas of Belgium, more mountainous regions, those places. So there are some completely white images. Those would be very close to city centers, where there is just a lot more streets, more houses, where there would be a lot more light. And of course that reflects in the sky, and you can see it in the image.
After the second year, I decided I wanted to go on an exchange. So I went to Portland, America. The reason I picked America was, for me, it was quite clear from the beginning, because so many photographers I looked up to worked in America or lived there, or their work just involves the American road trip, or the classic American landscape, and it just intrigued me so much, and I wanted to know how I would approach the American landscape, and for me as a European, if I would pick out the same things, and just, yeah, if it spoke to me as much as the American citizen, it's because Portland is becoming such a popular and hip town, and everybody wants to move there. So because of all the people coming there, the houses are just rising and rising in price. So the people that have lived there for generations have to move out or just have to move further into the suburbs. And just how people and place can influence each other, like how they make each other, but also how it changes constantly. Like every day there's new people moving out and coming in. This project in Portland and just this exchange really changed my way of approaching photography. I appreciated a more long-term approach and getting to know people before taking the picture, and focusing more on my relationship with the people, and then letting the pictures come from that instead of like being on the hunt for a picture. So it really helped me a lot to understand what your influence is as a photographer on the people you meet, and how it also influences the pictures that come out of it. I started photography with the goal to make nice images. It also changed how I look at things or how I experience them. For example, now if I walk on the street, there's no way I can walk on the street without thinking what kind of pictures I can make. And that can be sometimes like tiring yourself, but also the other way around. It can make something that looks so ordinary, make it look so special in your mind because you see the possibilities of it. Or it makes you appreciate small things that you would normally not really look at or pay attention to. It also made me a different person in interactions, because you really have to learn how you approach people. You have to learn how you can talk to people, how you can make them feel comfortable, even though you yourself are quite nervous or, for taking their picture. And for me, it really changed myself, because I became like a calm person in a way, even though I'm kind of like a nervous person in general. And it made me meet so many new people that I would otherwise not meet. It made me go to places I would never go, and just see the beauty in it. And I think for me, it has given me so much value in life, and just given me like a fresh wind or something in my life to just use my eyes and look at what's around me and just taking a moment and appreciating it.
However, an online presentation is very valuable these days, showing your work at BredaPhoto Festival would have been different. Killian explains.
In an exhibition, I would like to have seen it projected in a dark room, very big, to sort of immerse you into the light that I experienced when I was there. That's kind of the idea. Yeah, surround you with those colors and lights that I saw, and kind of make it clear that to kind of show how bright it really is, and I think at some point it might actually be shocking how much light there is.
The work of a photographer never stops. One project often leads to another. After the work for BredaPhoto, Jante is already working on a new project.
The last project I worked on is called biophilia. Biophilia, the word itself means the love of life or the appreciation of life. The reason I started from that was because during lockdown I realized how much I was drawn to nature, but then I also saw how many other people were coming to the same parks and the same forests. So I quickly realized this draw to nature was a more universal thing, like a human thing. And that's how I came across the word biophilia, because biophilia, it's an evolutionary tendency towards nature to look for
go more to the pure form of biophilia, which means not just using nature as a way to satisfy yourself, but more the symbiosis between nature and people. How people and nature can live next to each other instead of people just using it for their own gain. So I went to places of harmony, for example, eco-villages or farms where the vegetables and fruits are grown in a sustainable way. So I went looking for other way of life, and if the people there were finding their happiness in these places.
According to Jante, the key word to success is perseverance.
You have to embrace the mistakes. You have to accept that there's just gonna be a lot of times you're gonna just curse at yourself because you did something wrong, or somebody else is gonna point out something that you did wrong, and you just have to accept it and not really be angry at yourself, but just learn from it and go on and just keep going and don't get discouraged even when things go a little bit wrong.
Thank you, Narafi. Thank you, Kask. Thanks to Annabella Schwachten and Joost Emir for your pitches. Thank you, Renee Paule and Raquel van Haver for being present on today's webinar. Remember, there's a new webinar every Wednesday between 4 and 6 Central European Time. Next Wednesday, the 23rd, the subject of the webinar is the vulnerable nature of the personal story. Every Sunday, there's an artist talk on this same platform. Thank you very much for watching, and we hope to see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Surumbático. Surumbático. Ok. Bueno, chao.
Ziet ze het?
Hoor je ons nog? Nu wel.
Nee. Ja, oh wel.
Dankjewel.
Dank je.
Dankjewel. Oké. Dag.